at Star Wars News Net. I am joined today by Brian, who is back. He is
What's going
the
on?
brave one tonight, battling all sorts of illnesses
Oh,
that
whatever.
the dark side of the Force has thrown at him this week. But Brian, we appreciate you hopping on. And then from the great state of Hawaii, none other than Mr. J is back after a 3-week hiatus. He has returned to
Hello,
us.
everyone.
What's going
So
on?
it's good to have you both back. How we doing? Doing all right?
Here.
Hanging in there?
Yo, yeah, I'm really excited for tonight. Got a great topic, and
We do.
yeah, no, I think we're gonna have a lot of fun tonight.
Yeah, so for those who are not aware, we are going to be talking about The Force Awakens this evening. I think, like so many people, we're just at that point where it's been 4 years since, The Rise of Skywalker came out, and that doesn't seem like that long of a time, but it really does feel that way. And so we really were like, you know what, the strike is still going on. Movie, news is getting pushed back. So why don't we do something we've never done here at Star Wars News Net? And we're just gonna do a deep dive, just full out discussion over each, film that has come out as we prepare for hopefully more feature film news in the coming months. As that's hopefully ramping up once the strike is over. So hop in on the chat tonight. Let us know how you are feeling about The Force Awakens. We're going to get it started. We're going to kind of go a little bit sequentially. So we're not even going to talk about the movie itself first, because what was so great about The Force Awakens, and I'm going to hit you guys up on this in just a moment, is the experience building up to The Force Awakens. Those months where we were just waiting on an ounce of news. We were just waiting on the little tiniest tidbit. So I'll kick it to you first, Brian. Was there a moment, like a trailer moment, or even like maybe it was like a Vanity Fair variety piece that came out or something before the movie arrived, that was the, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, like let's freaking go, like moment for you?
It was the entire so that moment was the entirety of that first trailer we were talking about before we went live.
Mm-hmm.
The one that came out like Thanksgiving the year before in 2014. That whole trailer. Like, I know you were talking about like certain shots in it, but that whole trailer was like, this is actually happening. They're actually doing this. We're actually going to get more Star Wars. But the one moment in any trailer that really like drove home the point for me that it was, holy crap, we're actually going back, was the whole Chewie, we're home. At the end of the second trailer. So that was when it finally hit that this is Star Wars again. Like we're going back. Like this is it.
That's such a good one when you hear Chewie, we're home. You just get that. You feel like you're home, and that was the point behind it, for you to feel like you were home again in the Star Wars universe. So Jay, was there a moment for you as this was coming out that you were like, there it is. That's it. It just hit me right in the feels.
I think there are a lot of moments like that. I think that the final trailer where Rey is talking with Han, and she says, "I've heard stories," and it's got the classic music playing in the background, and then Han says, "It's true, all of it." That one was really great. I think that one was a really great trailer moment. But for me, I'll never forget like you said, Brian, and like in the very first trailer, the 86-second clip one, where it showed like
he's got it down to the number, folks.
It was so unnecessary to put out a trailer at that point, but they did it anyway.
Yeah. Well, what happened too was like, everyone was like, they had set photos that were leaking. That's why.
Yeah.
And so J.J. Abrams was like, all right,
cut something.
Yeah. Show them something so that our stuff doesn't get leaked. But I think for me, the one shot that blew my mind was Kylo Ren's crossguard lightsaber reveal when he ignited his lightsaber for the first time in the snow, and then you got to see like his iconic crossguard now. That for me was like mind-blowing, because again, like I think we all kind of were expecting like a different kind of lightsaber.
Yeah,
absolutely.
when we saw the crosscut, we were like, "Oh, that's really different," And then we all coming up on theories. I was like, "Oh, is this kind of like an Excalibur sort of thing? How is he going to use that?" And
Mhm.
when you look back at it, it's like, of course, it's so practical now, especially since so many people in Star Wars get their hands cut off.
Yes,
So to finally have a
absolutely.
lightsaber that has uh protection against that, we were like, oh, that's so brilliant. The other thing
Mhm.
too is what I'll mention is I was in high school during that time, and I was like studying to be a artist for like video games and movies and stuff like that. I actually did a digital painting of that same exact shot, and it was like really fun, and it was like my first time using like um a Wacom, art tablet, and then doing like using Photoshop and all of that stuff. So I remember I can't I was looking up trying to find that same artwork that I did. Can't find it unfortunately at the moment, but it was definitely a big highlight for me. That
Mhm.
one shot.
For me, it was the like first little teaser, and I still remember the dialogue. It's just the voice overlay, and it's just there's been an awakening. Have you felt it? And then it goes to like the dark side, and it's just Kylo igniting the lightsaber into the snow, and the light, and then we go back to the other side, and then kind of cuts out, and then just boom, that main theme
That
hits, and the
fanfare,
Falcon
yeah.
just comes out, and that's pretty much how it ends. Like that's all we see, and that for me is that's the best one. It didn't give me anything for the film. It didn't give me it didn't give anything away that I was like dying to see. Because I wanted that hype to be there. That was the time in Star Wars where the secrecy was okay. Now I
Mhm.
think they need to peel back the curtain a little bit. But for the time, it was perfectly fine. So that was for me. That will always live in infamy and glory in my
Yeah.
heart. There is nothing that probably will ever be able to top that. I was like 18 at the time, like about to graduate high school, and finishing up and going into my first year at college. So like that was I was like this little teenager that was like, oh my gosh, and trying to show all my friends. But I also it was not necessarily the coolest thing to be a super nerd when you're 18, but who cares?
The,
So
the
moving
X-wings
in,
over the water too. That was a cool shot with the sound,
yes.
just the sound effects of
Hmm.
it. That whine of the X-wing.
Hmm.
That was sweet.
So the next one is, before we get into the movie, was there a standout like theater moment, like an experience you had in the theater, like a standout moment there that really was a tipping point for you? That because sometimes a theater experience can be bad, and they can ruin your appreciation for a movie until you see it again. But other times you go and you do the theater experience, and it just heightens it to places that it wouldn't have gone to otherwise. So I'm curious for both of you, whether or not you had that, or if it was just I enjoyed the movie no matter what. Jay, you said I think earlier you had something, so go for it.
I do. So like I was telling Brian and Tyler this before we started, but yeah, this was a big deal for me. And what I don't know if you guys ever done this, but I actually went to a Star Wars movie marathon um when episode 7 came out. So I actually did do a full Star Wars marathon in theaters um on the day of The Force Awakens. And so I watched all seven of the movies that just came out in one day, in one theater sitting.
That's beautiful.
That's
And
beautiful.
I did the same thing. I'm
did you
telling you,
really?
I
Beauty.
was there. I did that for Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker.
No
Oh
way.
God.
Oh, wait, hang on. So for okay, so for The Force Awakens, 7 movies, and it started at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Tyler, when you did The Rise of Skywalker, when did that
I
start?
took a vacation day from work. The next day it started at 5 p.m. So I took a half day of work, and I took a
Okay.
vacation day the next day. I watched all 8 movies, and then actually left before the Rise of Skywalker movie premiered, which was like 5 hours before the rest of everyone got to see it. I left before the movie played and went home because one of my best friends was flying into town, and we were like going to go see the movie together for the first time. And so me and my buddy I went to the marathon with, actually, the two of us went back to my house and we watched The Last Jedi again with someone else who was trying to catch up before Rise of Skywalker. So I watched The Last Jedi back to back, and then went picked my friend up from the airport, went straight to Rise of Skywalker. We watched it that night. So I guess in like a from 5 to 5, 10 to 9. I mean, I watched like 9, 10 Star Wars movies in that time. And then we went back to see Rise of Skywalker the next morning at like 10:30 a.m. at an IMAX. So it was quite the ordeal. Anyway, sorry, Jay, but take it away. I love a good movie marathon. I'm a slut for a movie marathon, let me tell you.
No, I really did enjoy it actually. I will say it was a long experience though, because unlike you though, I didn't actually leave the theater. I stayed there for the entire time, and so yeah, it was a long period from 4. I started at 4 a.m. The whole thing started at 4 a.m. in the morning, and we ended around 9:30 at night.
Oh yeah.
And it was the entire theater. It was the entire day of just being in the theater and sitting down watching it, eating theater food. But it was great because for one thing, like I had never seen all of the Star Wars movies in theater, right? And for me, like just being able to say that, like of course, we probably in our own circle, know other people who have done that. But, for other more casual people, they're like, oh, you've seen all the Star Wars movies in theaters? That was like a really big thing. But yeah, no, I think that like that was a really great experience, the whole movie marathon experience. And then I'll say like when it finally got to The Force Awakens, the moment that was really awesome was just when Rey and Finn are running to like the different ships, and then Rey is like, we gotta get a ship. Finn's like, what about that ship? That ship's garbage. And then the ship blows up, and then Rey is like, okay, the garbage will do. Turns out to be the Millennium Falcon. Everyone that got the biggest laugh. That got the biggest laugh in the theater. Everyone applauded, and yeah, it was just really great. Yeah, it was a great movie experience.
This is insane. So my Force Awakens theater marathon event, me and my best friend at the time, we're hanging out. This is my oldest friend. Like we're still close friends today. Like oldest friend I have. We sat next to this guy who kept getting in and out of the theater every like hour to do a smoke break, and he would come back, and every time be like, "Oh boys, I'm back. Here we go. Another hour." And he told us he quit his job for this event because they told him he could not take off work to
you don't want to work for them anyway.
And they told him he couldn't have off work. He said, I quit that damn job. I'm not working for someone that tells me I can't spend my day for The Force Awakens. I've been waiting 10 years for this. And I'm like, this guy just goes on, and we're like, this guy is amazing. Like I love this guy. That's the dedication. Now I'm thinking, dude, quit his job? Like, are you serious? Like, oh my gosh. But it was just incredible. And before we continue, I just want to thank Diamond Figs for the super chat. Appreciate you once again hopping on here. Feel free, Diamond Figs, drop where people can reach you. Drop your your stuff so we can follow you back. That would be awesome. And so yeah, the theater experience for me was fantastic. Brian, theater experience for you, what was that like?
It was awesome. We were in this massive, we were in an IMAX. It was one of the only movies I think I've ever actually seen in IMAX. And my wife couldn't handle it because it was just so big. It was so overwhelming that we don't go watch IMAX movies anymore.
Yeah.
But it was really cool. Yeah, that dogfight was awesome. But one of the like as simple as a moment as it is, I think it's a very underrated moment. And I was just feeling pure joy was when Rey and Finn meet Han and Chewie for the first time. They're on their like own freighter, and the Conja Club and the Guavian Death Gang both show up at the same time. And Han's like talking both ends of the hallway, and he's like, have I ever let you guys down before? And they're like, yeah. And the other one's like, yeah, twice. And he's like, what was the second time? And Chewie's just like, yeah. Like it was such an underrated moment. I loved it because it was showing how Han just went right back to being a swindler and a scoundrel the way he was before we found him in A New Hope.
Absolutely.
And you know, he's just but he's no good at it. That's the thing. Like, he just sucks at it. And so it was such a great little moment. And you know, that's Star Wars humor that works, you know, and I really enjoyed it.
I just want to say too, for those that are watching live on Twitter right now, go ahead and try to join on the YouTube stream. Go to our YouTube channel, Star Wars Newsnet, and join the chat here. For whatever reason, I cannot get my comments to show up on Twitter tonight. Usually I like to have that going just so a few times people will comment on Twitter, and I can just click on there and see those. But the comments aren't showing up for me. So if you have something to say, we'd love to hear it. So if you hop on the YouTube channel, that'd be awesome, and then we can get the ball rolling there. So let's just dive into the movie itself. We've talked about the great movie theater experiences. We're going to talk more about the shots, and every Star Wars fan has that awe-inspiring moment kind of from being back in Star Wars, I would say. But for you guys, this is kind of the meat and potatoes of a story. Is like when you're watching a movie, who is the one that is going to deliver that most like impactful performance, the one where you leave the movie and that's the character you kind of go back to because their performance resonated so strongly with you. So I would love to know for you guys, when you left the movies, which actor then left the biggest impression on you with their necessarily the character arc in the movie, or it was just how it was portrayed. And I would be curious to know, is that still the character? Is that still the actor performance that you love the most from the movie? Or has it changed like over time as you've thought more about it or watched back on it? Brian, we'll start with you for this.
I'm going to say Adam Driver is Kylo. I think he was the standout for episode 7. He was supposed to be a pseudo Vader, you know, and we'll talk more about what more later. At least I will, about what I thought made him stand out, you know, from other dark side characters we've seen. But I thought he did a great performance for somebody who's behind a mask for 3/4 of the movie.
Yep.
I think he did a great job portraying, you know, his emotions and, you know, and everything. And what a great voice. They did such a good job on his voice. It wasn't too much like Vader, but it was still, you know, like its own thing. And it's like, just sounded so intimidating, you know, and even some of the humor involving him, you know, with him and Poe at the beginning of the movie, you know, who talks first? You talk first? I talk first, you know, and he's just like, the old man gave it to you. And he did such a great job with it, showing somebody who was conflicted in what they were doing. Like, they wanted to do it so bad, but they were so conflicted in doing it. He did such a great job of that. Especially the whole scene with Han, you know, the scene with Han. And I think that was such a pivotal moment. You know, he was the character that got to do that, you know, and so, and I shouldn't say got to do that, but he was the character that was involved with, you know, that, and that's a huge deal. And even later on in the woods when, you know, he's fighting Finn and Rey, he just did such an amazing job. He was the one I took away from it. And I absolutely love it. And I still say that he's a standout to this day. I think, you know, we're talking about the other movies, you know, maybe it's different, but for this movie alone, I think he was the standout for it.
Well, who's the character and the person that people, I think, almost universally would love back in the Star Wars? It's Adam Driver and Ben Solo. That's what people that I see online or talk to, that's the ones that they're clamoring for to come back, that they are dying to see more of, because it felt like, as great as he was, we didn't quite get as much as we'd like. And so I agree with you. I thought, for me, Adam Driver and Kylo, I think the Last Jedi performance stood out a little bit more to me than his Force Awakens. It was a great intro in Force Awakens, for sure. I mean, everyone was, he was a very strong character. So Jay, for you, what was that performance from someone that just kind of stood out to you that was just awe-inspiring, or you felt was just very nuanced? What was it?
So Brian already talked about Adam Driver, and I have to echo that. I think that, especially for me at the time, like, Adam Driver was such an unknown actor. Well, I mean, he of course he was kind of out there, but people didn't really realize like how good he was until The Force Awakens and until The Last Jedi. Then that's when you started to see him like getting more and more of these roles. And then you're like, oh wow, yeah, this guy's phenomenal. But I will say, because Brian already talked about Kylo Ren and Adam Driver, I think for me, the other great performance that I thought was amazing was Daisy Ridley as Rey. I think that that one scene where she's in the interrogation table and Kylo Ren is trying to get into her mind, and then she's fighting him off, and then she's got like tears rolling down. Like I thought that scene.
That one right there.
Yeah, no, I think that her performance was great, but also I think what did it for me too was just the mystery around the character, because at the time we didn't really know who any of these characters were, and I love the misdirection too that the trailers did, where we were all thinking Finn was going to be the focus and the main Jedi, and then a bit of that trickery, a bit of that loop-de-loop that they did in the film.
Well, the trailer actually says that. Like it says, when what Brian mentioned earlier, when he said it's true, all of it, like the dark side, the Jedi, and there's a line where he says the Jedi, and it goes to Poe patting Finn on the shoulder, and Finn turns, and the camera stops at him in the trailer, and it's it literally says the Jedi and goes to Finn, and we're led to believe right there that he is, to quote Morpheus, he is the one. Sorry. Keep going though.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I think that Daisy Ridley's performance, obviously she is the main character in The Force Awakens, and obviously like she became a huge focus, and now she's obviously like a huge fan favorite too, where she's now getting her own like an upcoming sequel too. But I think like just at the time, like all of these, the whole cast was just full of like unknowns, quote unquote, and people, well, especially for Daisy Ridley, this is actually like her first feature film. But I think for me, for someone who was a newcomer, I think she did a phenomenal job. Like Nate, who's in the chat said too, Daisy Ridley in the opening jacuzzi with no dialogue.
Yeah,
I totally actually did like once we got through that Jakku scene where she's scavenging and then she's got the X-wing helmet on. I think that all of that was phenomenal and got me like on board. And I was like, all right, I like this character.
It was, so I want to kind of comment on, I was going to say exactly what Nate was going to say, and I want to carry that even a step further, which is the opening scene introduces with Rey, where without words introduces us to probably for what I believe to be a top 3 favorite John Williams theme for me. John Williams score, which absolutely. Is Rey's theme for me is just phenomenal, and the different ways that they like interlude and weave that into the different pivotal moments of the saga, especially like in the big moments where they will even like kind of weave it into like bits of the Force theme, and then like I think my favorite one too at the end of Rise of Skywalker, where it's bum, 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 and they just really get it, but just the little flute playing when she's going across and you see the Star Destroyer, that's maybe my favorite shot in the whole movie, because we get the new music and it feels like, okay, this character's big, she's getting her little theme that we're gonna see, and then you have the Star Destroyer behind her. I absolutely love that. We'll go through a few comments here. No classic is Mothmatic planets, X-Wing versus TIE fighters, same New Hope structure. The new characters were the best thing. We could talk about that for a moment. I mean, what were your guys' thoughts? Because it is a pretty strong mirroring, of A New Hope. You have the person that's, trying to get away from the evil bad guys in Finn, just like kind of they're trying to do in the A New Hope. Someone gets captured. They have to go to a giant round space station and blow it up from the inside. There's a little trench run that they have to go on to get there. The super weapon, all of the stuff. What were your guys' thoughts as we then go through some more of these chats? And then just again, though, Andrew, I'm glad you could join live tonight. You're always down to listen, but you're able to join live tonight. That's great. But yeah, Brian, what do you think? about the New Hope structure, because that was a divisive.
It was there.
Thing.
It was definitely there. And it was something I think a lot of people picked up on like, quick. As soon as Poe gave BB-8 the little map chip, as soon as he, you get this as far away from here as you can, and everybody's like, I think that was the moment. Everybody's like, this is just like A New Hope already. But and there were several beats. I mean, and it's not just The Force Awakens. It's the entire sequel trilogy.
Right.
Really echoed the classic trilogy a lot. Even with Rey, she's basically the exact same character as Luke Skywalker, almost beat for beat all the way through all three movies. And I think for The Force Awakens, it worked because, for a lot of Star Wars fans, even at that point, the prequels, I mean, I know the prequels were a big point of contention for a lot of fans. And I think that a lot of people still had that bad taste in their mouth from the prequels. And they're like, crap, are they going to do the same thing with Star Wars they did in the, in the 90s and early 2000s? Or is this going to be, and I think what Lucasfilm did was they were trying to show, hey, Star Wars is back, but we're going to play this first one safe just to show you that it's back. And I think that's and I think that was actually the right choice for that particular movie, considering, we were bringing back legacy characters from 40 years ago. I think that was a really good way to get back into the galaxy and play it safe. But I think maybe it wasn't the right thing to do because I think that one was so safe when Last Jedi just was so different. That's when people were like, whoa, what the hell? Like, what happened? I think so maybe it ended up hurting the whole trilogy in the long run, but at the time, I think it was the right choice to do just to get Star Wars back on the screen.
I want to hit on this comment too for a moment, because this, I think, kind of ties into the A New Hope mirroring structure. It's just basically a superb nod to those characters and the actors that played them. But I will say, for me, and I'm curious if this is the same for you, I feel like it's probably not, because I've always felt as if people have come back at me at this one. When I got taken out of the film, I was most engaged in the beginning as we were going through with these new characters. I was really invested, like the Falcon scene on Jakku where, Rey and Finn are having to escape. Like, that's just one of my favorite moments. But it was when Han and Chewie first got into the scene. That's actually kind of when I took a step back, and it didn't lose me. I love it. But for me, that's kind of when the movie takes a step back and it loses me for a little bit, because it felt like, all right, we're going to force Han and Chewie into this movie now. And I was so invested in these new characters, and I was perfectly fine just letting them continue to explore. I was having a blast watching Finn and Rey do their whole back and forth. I could do this. I could do this. I could do this. And then they're just having they're yelling back and forth.
You got a boyfriend? Cute boyfriend?
It was, yes. And then you got BB-8 giving the thumbs up. It was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so whenever their dynamic, they just had such great chemistry that it felt like once Han was in there, it kind of took away a little bit from what was bubbling and what was budding there. So I'm curious, Jay, you look like you're about to, claw at me through the screen. And Harrison Ford, Han Solo's my favorite Star Wars character of all time. So, that's trying not to be blasphemous here.
No, I think you bring up a good point, though. I know, like, sometimes we don't always agree on certain opinions, but I understand where you're coming from. And I think, though, that was always a big question of this movie was, when are these guys going to appear? When are the original trilogy cast members going to show up? And I remember being in the theaters, like you, I was invested in the story of like Rey and of Finn and of Poe. But throughout all of that, I was just kind of like looking at my watch, being like, oh, Han Solo isn't here yet.
You're looking at your watch the first time? What are you doing?
What?
Right. It's like, while of course I was invested in it, but like I was definitely looking at the clock a little bit, going like, okay, 20 minutes in, 30 minutes. I don't know like when Han Solo and Chewie do show up, but I know it's for like a good, like maybe like 20, like, no, I'm gonna say like, I think 40
it's a good 35,
yeah, because like you have that entire I think they do a good job of, like you said, making you invested in the new characters, right? Especially after that Falcon chase through the Star Destroyer and everything. I think that was a great sequence, and like you said, the banter between Rey and Finn is phenomenal. But I think that you do have a little bit of a point, for those who are kind of maybe who are looking to just focus on these new characters. It is a little bit, I'd say, a bit of a convenience that Han Solo kind of just showed up a little bit out of the blue. So I do kind of agree with you, Tyler.
Okay, Brian, what about you? I don't know. Is this a heretic? Like, am I committing heresy up here?
I'm the complete opposite of Jay. I was so invested in the movie the first time I watched it. I wasn't even thinking about Han and Chewie and everything. I was so, and like you guys said, invested in, what was going on with Rey and Finn, to the point where when the Falcon does get swallowed up by the freighter that Han and Chewie are on, I still hadn't even pieced it together that was Han and Chewie. I really was sitting here thinking it's the First Order. They're screwed. Like, they really thought they got away. And but when the door slides open and then you see Han running first and you get that side profile, that was like, I was so caught up in it that it still took a second to register that,
yeah,
this is awesome. And so, but seeing them on the Falcon again, and and Han looking around and realizing stuff's misplaced, like out of place, and looking around, and it was nice. It was nice. But I really hadn't even thought about him at all. And then same thing with like Leia. There were a couple of moments where I was like, well, when's Leia gonna pop up? We saw her in the trailer at least once, and so when she did show up, it was a little more predictable because Han was like fixing his jacket and stuff when he's standing there, and it's like, but it was cool. But yeah, no, it didn't even really dawn on me at all.
So this is interesting. We need to talk about this person. We need to talk about Oscar Isaac's performance as Poe, because something that is really interesting is the hero. If I'm correct here, we start with Oscar Isaac in each movie in terms of the first hero that we see, because The Force Awakens starts with him, with Lars Santeca. And then, the Last Jedi starts with him doing his thing in the cockpit with Hux and giving him a hard time. And then, of course, the first heroes that we see in The Rise of Skywalker is when they're going off doing, they're trying to get the spy, the tape that R2 has to plug in. And Poe is there with Finn and they're doing the whole thing. And we kind of start with him a lot of times. And so for me, I felt like The Force Awakens was his maybe the best one that we got for him. I like his arc. We'll talk about The Last Jedi next week, and I love that movie. So I don't want to talk anything Last Jedi. But his Force Awakens arc was pretty good too. I think he really does a great job of selling everyone on Star Wars being back at the very beginning. But I do think Poe is kind of the forgotten character in this whole sequel trilogy because he doesn't wield the Force. He's not quite as, powerful a figure nearly as Han Solo is. And he doesn't, his sidekick, BB-8, kind of goes off with, Rey in the end. So he's kind of left to just, hang out and bro out with whoever's available. So I'm curious what you guys have to say about Oscar Isaac's performance as Poe. And why do you think maybe he is the forgotten child of the trio, so to speak?
I'll tell you why he's forgotten, because he's only in half of Force Awakens. Like he's he's in the first part, he helps Finn escape, and then he disappears for a good half the movie. You think he's dead the first time you watch it. And honestly, I mean, on the first time I watched it, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, did they really kill him off that quick? And then he just pops up randomly, on the Resistance base. But he wasn't in most of the film the way, Daisy and John were, and Adam. They were really forefront in that first movie in Force Awakens. So it was almost like he was treated like a secondary character, not just that we saw him as one, but he actually was kind of treated as one. He was a plot device. Honestly, he was there when the plot needed him to be there.
That's fair. Jay?
I really appreciate you bringing this topic up, because actually, now that I think about it, going into this film, The Force Awakens, I think for me, I was really excited to see Oscar Isaac play because I was a fan. I had watched Inside Llewyn Davis a little bit before. Funny enough, so Inside Llewyn Davis, for those that don't know, that's the Coen Brothers movie with Oscar Isaac. It also features Adam Driver though. Adam Driver
That
is
is
also
ironic.
like, yeah, Adam Driver is also in it, and he has a small role. But Oscar Isaac and Inside Llewyn Davis, I was a big fan of that movie. I thought his performance was really great. So I was really excited to see, again, him play in this universe. And the other thing too is like he was playing a X-wing pilot, and I love like X-wings. I love Star Wars ships. I always say like if I was in the Star Wars universe, I'd be a pilot. And
I'd always want to be a pilot, but there's zero chance I'd be able to. I would be too scared to fly. I'd crash so fast.
Same actually. Like I actually get motion sickness, so like it's just not possible for me. But I will say I think echoing a little bit of what Brian was saying, he is forgotten partly due to the fact that he doesn't get a whole lot of screen time besides the beginning of the film. He gets it at the beginning and the end, but in the middle he disappears, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing too is I think at that time, like, and I don't know if like maybe other people feel the same way, but I still think that like when it just comes to like characters that aren't Jedi or Sith, sometimes Star Wars has trouble knowing what to do with these characters, and so when you have a character that's an X-wing pilot, it's like, oh, like, well, what are we gonna do with this guy? He's not a Jedi or Sith, and so it's kind of that unfortunate thing where I think Star Wars is still trying to find, what do we do with these characters. Thankfully, it is changing around, and I think, with things like Rogue One and Andor, thankfully these characters can have a little bit more of time to shine, even just beyond the books and the comics.
I don't know. I feel like the only character that gets a little bit underserved that isn't like some force wielder is Padme, probably a little bit, because just some of the stuff I think in Attack of the Clones, they cut out a lot of the deleted scenes. If you ever watched the deleted scenes for Attack of the Clones, she has some really great moments in there that get cut out, and I think it loses just a little bit of her agency as a character. But I mean, I think that the Jedi Sith Han Solo is maybe the most popular Star Wars character ever, and he doesn't move forward. I mean, we don't really see Leia wield the Force until actually see her wield the Force until the Rise of Skywalker. But unless you want to count, Luke calling out to her the Force, her hearing them, is that like a Force? If that's her also using the Force, I would argue that's because she's so maybe hypersensitive to it. But at first, she's not necessarily this Force user as well. Are we counting droids? Like, do we count droids? Does that count? Because that's like, is that the gray area? I can't wait till we have a Force wielding droid someday.
So I'll augment my what I said earlier. Then I'll say, like, at the start, there was definitely the chance and the opportunity for non-Force users to have a big role. I think over time, though, because, well, audiences maybe they just wanted, like, okay, let's see more lightsabers, let's see more Force users, and with the prequels, I think over time, like, it became a little bit more difficult for non-Force users to have a story and a role. And you even see that in Andor. You even see that with people who talk about Andor. They're like, this isn't Star Wars because there's no lightsabers, and I'm like,
you can blame. I think you can blame the prequels for that. Because because when the classic trilogy was coming out, there was only 2 Jedi. It was Obi-Wan and Luke. Those are the only 2 Jedi that you saw. They were extinct. You didn't see a crap load of them. So they were special, but they were balanced out by all these other characters, the droids, Han Solo, Leia, and Chewie, and even Lando, moving down further down. And so I think it was a really nice balance. And the prequels came out, and then it was just Jedi everywhere. Like, just the whole Battle of Geonosis, like, holy crap, they're everywhere. And I think ever since then, every single era that we've looked at has just been crawling with Jedi. And I mean, you know, we got characters that still stand out, like Mando. He still stands out, you know, but for the most part, a lot of the eras that we look at, there's just Jedi everywhere now. There's Force users everywhere, you know, and it's they Anakin didn't bring the Force into balance, because now they're all back, and now that's what everybody cares about, is all the Jedi. Nobody cares about all the nobodies. But
before we move on, just in the chat, let us know favorite character from The Force Awakens. Who was it? Who'd you fall in love with? Would love to know. Let's talk about these two for a minute. I feel like we got to talk about them before we wrap up this conversation. This is one of my favorite shots in the movie, with the hug that they give Han and Leia back together in that brief moment. Just is a heart-touching a scene. So for you guys, obviously they have very limited time on screen together. That was something I think that all of them were a little frustrated by, the three of them not being on the screen together at the same time. I think that was something they were all a little bit frustrated with. I understand why they went that direction. But for you, Han and Leia's arcs in the movie, Harrison Ford, the late Carrie Fisher, how did you feel that it was handled in this movie? What were your just general thoughts? Did you love it, hate it, favorite stuff? Brian, you can go ahead and kick this one off.
I think they handled Han and Leia really well. Looking back now, hindsight's always 2020. Now we've got a whole bunch of history that we didn't have then about, you know, how they got together and, you know, and got married and everything that happened in between, you know, with different novels and stuff. But at the time, I think they handled it well, because I think it was the natural progression. Looking at who Han and Leia were, I mean, they were two very different people. Yes, that's the book I'm talking.
The Princess and the Scoundrel.
Really
good.
Really good. Really good.
So pleasantly surprised by this book. I was like going into it, I'm like, I don't know about this, and I was like, this is excellent.
Same. I loved it. I was genuinely surprised. Maybe this is a minor spoiler for that book. It's really close to the beginning, so I don't feel like it is. But there's a whole scene in that book it's the scene that got me hooked. It's when Leia finds the funeral pyre for Vader, and she's talking to the helmet, and, you know, and it's like, oh my god, like I was won over at that book, that moment. Like that was it.
Absolutely.
But we've gotten a lot of history now with Han and Leia, and like I said, I think it's the natural progression. He was the scoundrel and she was the princess, and they both, I mean, they were very opposite people, even from the get-go. Even when they were, you know, getting together in Return of the Jedi, and you know, they finally sealed the deal. It was like, you're like, that makes no sense. Like, you know, like I get opposite the tracks, but holy shit, like those two, like everybody, you know, but it makes sense. We, you know, now that we know the whole history of what happened, how they both handled it, Han went back to doing what he was doing. You know what I mean? Like it makes sense to me. So I think they handled it really well. I was kind of bummed to find out that they weren't together at first, you know, after everything. But then once the whole story came out, it's like, oh, gotcha. Okay, get it. So I think they did. I think they did it right.
Jay, what about you?
No, same with Brian. I think like I was kind of bummed out too that they weren't still together. But like, you know, like Brian said, when you find out that, oh, Ben was a big reason for the splits, then it kind of really hit me. Because I mean, you know, I think that, well, for one thing, I think a lot of people know personal experiences or stories of, you know, families broken up because, well, a child kind of goes astray. And then so to have that element in the story with them kind of resonated with me, and I really appreciated that. And just in general, I think they handled that relationship. Like there were enough moments between Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford to make it feel, you know, like I still think they had great chemistry. Like I actually really think like their chemistry.
Oh, they had a history together.
So, oh yeah,
you ever read the Princess Diarist, Carrie Fisher's memoir?
I know, I haven't read it, but I know.
It's so good. So good.
I should, yeah. So, yeah, you know, like you can definitely still feel the chemistry though on the screen in The Force Awakens. And I think that I will the one thing I do want to touch upon with Princess Leia and Han Solo, and I mean, of course, if you're here, you probably just already seen it, but Han Solo's death, I think it was actually handled really well. I think the way that and the thing is, like, I know a lot of people were kind of upset. They're like, oh man, Han Solo got killed and it's he just came back. But for me, like, when I saw that in theaters, immediately in my head I was already thinking, okay, this is how Kylo Ren is going to get redeemed later on.
Well,
they're
yeah, they
setting it
walked
up.
out on a bridge over a bottomless pit with no handrails. Like,
The
I
sun
remember,
quite literally gets taken out of the sky.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you can kind of see it. You saw it coming. But I think, like, just from like a storytelling perspective in my head, I was already seeing, like, okay, no, this is Kylo Ren is gonna do something irredeemable, quote unquote. Kind of, he actually kind of did do something like really evil, but that's gonna be like how he's gonna be brought back, like, and because if obviously he was like the Darth Vader type character, if he's gonna go the same route as Darth Vader, he's eventually gonna get redeemed and he's gonna look back at it with regret. So to me, it was like, I was like, it was already kind of obvious, and I thought that when Han Solo died, I thought like it was done with a great story purpose to it.
I think everyone knew Han was gonna go out with a bang or go out in some sort of really emotional faction, because it's no hidden secret that Harrison Ford wanted kind of Han to die in Return of the Jedi. He had said that before, that he kind of wanted his character to go off in a blaze of glory in that movie. So it wasn't a surprise to see him take it out at that point. For me, as I look back on their relationship and their dynamic, I would agree with Brian that I was a little disappointed they weren't together, just because it's like you look at any like couple and that you love, and if they're not together anymore, it does break your heart. And then after reading like Princess and the Scoundrel or something, it just really just breaks me that they end up pushing each other away. Bloodline, same
Last
thing.
shot, yeah.
So sad. But I will say, what is beautiful about The Force Awakens is that because they're both still so true to their core, they went back to the only things they knew. But as soon as they get together, that love, that passion is still there. Leia does not waste a moment wanting to embrace Han once before they leave. Like they talk for a minute, and she goes, and they get their usual banter, and then behind right after that, it's like, we're gonna come together. He knows that she knows. They do still love each other, and so I really do appreciate that. Anytime I watch these movies now and see Carrie Fisher perform as Leia, it just really touches me, because she was just taken from us so soon. And I remember watching, it makes me really appreciate, and I've shared this before, I had tickets to go to Dallas Comic Con, and I had purchased tickets, and I had purchased the Carrie Fisher, Anthony Daniels like VIP deal. It was a few $100 to do the whole VIP. And I decided not to go at the time. I ended up selling it for something else, because I was like, well, I'll go next year. And then, she passed, and it was just that moment of like, you just can't take those moments for granted. And watching this movie back and watching them, embrace each other like they do in that scene, it kind of calls me back to that, where they both know, as they're about to, depart, they both know that this could be the last time, that they hold each other. And in reality, when you think about it, Harrison Ford was not filming on the set of The Last Jedi. We don't know when the last time Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher spent a lot of time together. So I almost look at this, I'm like, this could have been one of the last moments that they did spend together in real life, and that it was filming this embrace. And I don't know where at in filming that was, but they didn't have a lot of moments filming together. And so it does kind of tear me up a little bit thinking back on it, knowing that, that's one of the last moments these people in real life also got to share an embrace, because there is a lot of history there between the two of them. And it is kind of poignant to see that play out on screen a little bit in a different fashion, of course. But the performance of Carrie Fisher will always loom on. And she's, to me, just kind of like Luke. She's the heart of Star Wars and the Skywalker saga, largely. So yes, I absolutely adore it. Han Solo is my favorite character. Harrison Ford is my favorite actor of all time, like Indiana Jones, everything. So give me all the Harrison Ford I can get. So before we close out with our final thoughts, I just was curious, and I wasn't able to get a hold of you guys before we weren't able to connect. But do you have a favorite shot from the movie? Is there the one moment of the movie, the one shot on the screen that that is the one every single time, chills, or you just love the camera work? What is it? Is there a specific shot or moment for you that just really does it? Jay, is there one for you?
Yes, there is. I think that just in general, I think J.J. Abrams has great cinematography. I think that his direction and the way he moves the camera is all really stand out. And there are a lot of I think you picked out the one where Rey is on her bike on going through the sand, and you get the ruins of the Star Destroyer in the back. I think for me, the shot that still just blows my mind, it's this it's during the Millennium Falcon chase sequence where they're being chased by the TIE fighters. And it's when they're about to enter into the Star Destroyer, but there's this really elaborate shot where the Millennium Falcon comes into the camera,
does
comes
the drift.
towards. Yeah, it does the drift. It does the drift, and then it goes. It drifts and then speeds into the back of the Star Destroyer through the engine. And what I think just blows my mind is there's a lot of elaborate camera work in that shot, because first it zooms out as the Millennium Falcon drifts into the camera, and then it does a hard zoom into the two ships going into the back.
You see a little bit of the camera shake when it zooms in.
Yeah.
It was a cool shot. Yeah.
No, I'm glad you remember it, Brian.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a cool shot.
Yeah,
that's a great one.
I think J.J. Abrams, he does a lot of those really elaborate camera work. Zack Snyder is another director who I feel does that a lot. And I think that those kind of elaborate camera works, where the camera gets involved in the choreography, those are always really stand out for me.
I love that. Brian, what about you?
I like the whole lightsaber battle sequence on Starkiller toward the end. I mean, with the snowy forest, and it just looks dark and cold. It's something we've never seen before. With a lightsaber battle. I know what I'm getting. I know the movie that I'm getting ready to say is a parody. Don't yell at me, guys. I know that, but it had a very Kill Bill feel to it. You know what I mean? With the sword fighting and the snowy. With the Lucy Liu fight. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It had that kind of quiet, peaceful feel to it, and then you got this weird epic battle going on right in the middle of this just peaceful scenery. I thought it was a very cool clash of themes, I guess you could say. And it was something we'd never seen before. Snowy forest. For some reason, that's just so cool to me. I love it. It was just awesome.
I do love that.
Just to piggyback off of that, I think that was also one that was the first real scene where I was really blown away by the lighting. The lighting, we talked about the lighting earlier, with Han Solo and Ben on the bridge, and that part of his face is illuminated in blue, part of it illuminated in red. It's another great shot, actually. And then eventually the blue fades out and he's drowning in red. But I think to see that was actually the first scene where we really got a sense of the lightsabers being the only source of light in a fight sequence. And of course, it wasn't Revenge of the Sith.
You see it right there,
yeah, just the way it's
you see the reflections in the eyes. Yeah,
exactly. I think that sequence, that lightsaber fight sequence, was actually did stand out for me as well, because again, the way the lighting and how the lightsabers are the source of the light is insanely good.
Well, yes, Jay, I agree. I mean, that's awesome because I picked this specifically because I wanted to talk about that shot. So it's like it's like a perfect little segue because I mentioned earlier I love the speeder bike. I just love Rey in general. So the speeder bike from her with the Star Destroyer, I love that, but that's more of with the music and everything. But this shot, you see the reflection of the lightsabers in her eyes, the just almost this panic at her eyes in this moment in the scene. And it's right, after this is when she closes them. And then you get really for the first time in the movie, just a real triumphant like force theme. And then she opens her eyes, right as like that beat hits. And that's when she kind of, she goes from like this defensive, she's on the defensive, retreating, no confidence nearly in herself. She feels lost. And then as soon as he mentions the force, she's like, the force? And she closes her eyes and then it hits and that shot right there. And then she opens it so confident. That to me it's my favorite moment of the movie. After the original Jakku sequence, like up in the real Jakku sequence is like right there, and then up until then it's that, and then the way it ends with the ground dividing the two of them in a very overt way of saying that these two are on opposite sides right now, but are also inextricably connected with each other at the same time. That was my personal just favorite. So we're at the 56-minute mark. So we're gonna have to wrap it up here. So I think the best way to wrap it up though is just kind of give like your last like just final thoughts, like wrap up everything we've talked about, and maybe just share, where does this, I'm not a big into like lists necessarily because I love all Star Wars, but in terms of like, I like to do tiers, and in terms of tiers, maybe for you, like where is this rank in terms of like your tiers of movies necessarily? For me, I look at it as like, I have my top two and then the next few, because I think when we go into like rankings of like, this was one, this is two, it gets a little bit more like, how could you have this above that? So in terms of tiers, where is this tiered for you, Brian?
It's changed over the years because are we talking like when it first came out or now?
Let's go right now because we've had time to reflect on it. Because I feel like when it first came out, we haven't had any other sequel movies, and Star Wars has been gone for 10 years. They could show me the Clone Wars animated movie in theaters, and I would be like, yes.
Right. It's a good movie. Don't get me wrong. I thought it's a good start to what they wanted to make as a trilogy. Because I mean, it's no secret. I don't even call it a trilogy. It's just 3 sequel films that had nothing to do with each other. So I hesitate to call it a trilogy. But at the time, it was a really good start, I think, to get Star Wars back out, into the public eye again. I still enjoy Force Awakens. I think it and Last Jedi kind of go well together. And I think it had a strong start for Star Wars. So, it's up there for me. It's not, I mean, it doesn't break, any of the classic 3 for me. Obviously, they're still my top 3. Well, I can't even say top 3 because Rogue One isn't my top 3. But it's definitely not the bottom of the list.
Yeah, we should also preface this and say, like, of course, like, I think for a lot of us, we all have our favorites.
Yeah.
But there are some that we don't like as much as others. And that's just, it's not that they're bad. It's just that
No,
frankly,
it's just some of them are bad.
Oh, no, all right.
Well, some of them are like
no,
objectively, like there are some like that are, I think objectively, like I don't know, they're probably just like Attack of the Clones. I don't think Attack of the Clones is a very good movie. I love Attack of the Clones. Like I'll watch it. I love Star Wars. I don't think it's a very good movie, but that doesn't mean I don't absolutely love it. Like,
it's Star Wars. It's still Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, man. It's not the greatest movie in the world, but I'll put that thing on. I'll put that thing on. I'll have a blast.
We don't talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point. Like, I think that some may not be objectively great, but like you're still gonna have fun with it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like the same way. So actually, for me though, The Force Awakens grew on me over time. I think my first initial my first initial reaction when I came out of the theater, I really disliked it. I actually didn't really like it for, because I was like, well, for one thing, I had just come from a marathon of movies, going and watching all, 7 of them at the time. And I was like, oh man, like this is just a New Hope all over again. So I kind of had a little bit of that like initial gut reaction of like, I don't like this. Over time, though, as we got to see how, the trilogy evolved, I think this is definitely the best of the sequel trilogy. I think this is definitely the. So Tyler, you're kind of like surprised at that, but
So this is a different episode.
For sure, we'll get into it in the following weeks. But in my opinion, I think The Force Awakens is the best of the sequel trilogy.
Okay, it's kind of at the bottom of. It's either the bottom of like tier 2 for me, or like the top of tier 3. It's probably in tier 3. Like tier 3 for me is pretty locked and secure. Like they're far and away.
Yeah.
Because. And I'll be honest, I have a sequel, prequel, and a original in my top tier of personal like favorites, and then I have the rest of the originals and other prequels. It's probably like tier 3, middle rung, solid. But then when you're talking 11 feature films that have come out,
oh wow,
there's quite a few, to choose from. But it's probably in that 7-8 range for me personally.
Yeah.
But
by the way, so like sorry to interrupt, but like for our listeners, we will be talking about the other movies like as the weeks go on. So tune back. Next week we will be talking about The Last Jedi. So yeah, I mean that's gonna be another interesting one.
I was gonna say that, but bring your popcorn next week because I'm 100% fired up for that movie. I will probably I literally have notes about that movie to talk because some people have made it their whole personality to hate that movie online, and it just drives me insane. Just like there's some people that make it their whole personality to shove the movie down other people's throats, and it drives me insane.
Yeah.
So bring your popcorn next week because we have Paul. We'll be back next week, and he absolutely hates The Last Jedi. I love it. Yeah. Miguel's gonna be here. So we're gonna go like through the sequel trilogy the next few weeks. Then we'll move on to another trilogy, and then the other, and then we'll hit the solo films. And hopefully we're gonna get some movie notes and some some other things that pop up. Hopefully from now and then. So yeah, next week bring your popcorn. It's gonna be a little explosive next week. It's definitely gonna be a little bit explosive.
Us opinions? No. We don't have opinions.
So
what are you talking about?
So Jay, where can we find you, Jay? What's going on?
Yeah, obviously it's great to be on here. I won't be on for next week for The Last Jedi. Hope to be on for The Rise of Skywalker. In all honesty, I've only seen it once. I've only seen The Rise of. I know, yeah. So I'm gonna have to rewatch it. I'm gonna have to rewatch The Rise of Skywalker. Again.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you for watching it once. I really don't.
Well, there we go, guys.
I had to go see it in theaters again. Like I saw. I'm sorry to interrupt you though. It was like I feel like I had to see it again to like digest it. Like
sure.
I'll be honest. I saw Force Awakens like 7 times in theaters.
I don't know why you went and saw Rise of Skywalker again. Because like, if you know a restaurant's going to give you food poisoning, why would you go eat there again? Like, I don't know why.
So that concludes everything. Brian doesn't have a website or a podcast that he wants to talk about at all.
No, not at all. You guys can find me at Star Wars Canon Podcast. You can visit my website, starwarscanon.net. Check it out.
Right there.
It's cool. Good show.
But you can catch me on Star Wars Newsnet. Next week we'll have week after I got 2 comic book reviews that'll be coming out. The High Republic Phase 3 is in full force now. I finished Eye of Darkness. Tales of Light and Life came out last month. It's going to be a fun ride. We got the comic books starting back up again. So it's going to be a good time. You can catch me here on Thursdays. I love chatting it up with everybody. Brian, Jay, thanks for joining us. I think we had a pretty fun, it's a solid discussion tonight.
Yeah,
everyone in the chat, Thanks for coming in, hanging out. We'll see you next Thursday, and may the force be with you always.
Have a good night, everyone.